All right, well, none of us would be here today if there wasn't a vision to build a robust North Bay community, and that dates all the way back to the founding of MSIV in April 2020. The founder of MSIV, you probably all know him, Zach, right down here. This is his 5th year in the trenches, building MSIV, building this community, and no one is better positioned than Zach to provide perspective on the history of this ecosystem, what he sees, what he thinks, the potential for the future. As we all know, he sees it all. He talks to all of you day in and day out. So joining Zach on the stage in this fireside chat is going to be Redwood Credit Union President and CEO, Brett Martinez. Brett's led Redwood Credit Union since 2004, and he's one of the most, he's a prominent business leader in the North Bay as well. So Brett and Zach, come on up.
I think you do. Oh, there you go. So testing, all right.
Well, this is pretty cool.
So you had your back to this group, front row here most of the day. Look out there. How does that make you feel?
That's amazing. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So I've been watching you guys for a long time, but this is the first event like this that I've been at, and it's pretty impressive. Congratulations. These two guys right here in the front row, talking to them at lunch, and this is their first conference, and I said, you just destroyed, they got destroyed because I go to conferences all the time. I have no patience, and I don't even have the attention span, but today I've been totally intrigued by this group, so sorry, this is the best it's going to get. All right, so everybody go back in your mind real quick to April 2020. Sorry, but you had to go there. So what was Zach doing April 2020? So you were building MSIV, and you had done a bunch of research on the entrepreneurial system up here in the North Bay. So what did it look like then, and what does it look like today in your perspective?
I think we've always had all the elements in the North Bay to have a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem. We just didn't have any one organization putting together the pieces. So, if you think about what can make a very vibrant startup community, you look at things like capital, right? Sonoma, Marin County, 2 of the most affluent counties in the entire country. You look at talent, right? Some of the highest levels of intellectual capital anywhere on planet Earth live in this community, but historically that intellectual capital was much more likely to be invested into a company in San Francisco, New York, or London than it was a Santa Rosa, San Rafael, Mill Valley-based startup company. And that was kind of what I noticed when I got to the North Bay. I first moved up here with my wife in July of 2016 and had come from San Francisco and before then kind of the greater Silicon Valley. And I was trying to figure out why the modern incarnation of Silicon Valley stretched from San Jose in the south, almost up to the Presidio of San Francisco in the north, and then seemingly last decade went east to Oakland, Emeryville, Berkeley. But when you look north of the Golden Gate Bridge, that 101 corridor from Sausalito up to Cloverdale, it kind of was the left behind corridor when it came to startup companies amongst the greater Bay Area. And I got really intrigued by this question for why that is. And I thought, oh my God, wouldn't it be super cool if we could bring startups to the North Bay? And then I realized how damn ignorant I was, because the reality was that we have an incredible 50-year history of startup companies here in the North Bay. It was just wildly underappreciated and not really known. So you look at the types of companies historically that have been built out of here. You look at Lucasfilm or Autodesk or Restoration Hardware or BioMarin Pharmaceutical or Glassdoor, which is the company that brought me up here, or Keysight Technologies, which is in the room. You look at Amy's Kitchen in Petaluma in food. You look at Athleta having been a Petaluma brand before it got bought by the Gap. You look at, every amazing company, not every company, but, we heard today, right? We heard from Helen at Equator. We heard from Serena and Lily. So everywhere you look, there are these amazing startup companies up here. but there is this perception that there's nothing happening up here. So that was kind of the background for me where I said, holy moly, it's not about bringing startups to the North Bay. It's about building a community to connect the dots for the people that already are here. So that was the inspiration in April of 2020 to ultimately launch MSIV. And we kind of looked at it, Brett, in these 4 different buckets. We looked at it in terms of founders, right? You had all these startup founders building up here, but they didn't know each other. And they weren't connected with any one thing, right? You had mentors, titans of global business living in this community, yet no mechanisms for them to really lean in and mentor a local entrepreneur. If you wanted to come to a gathering for the North Bay startup community, there was no North Bay Next, right? There was nowhere to go. And then finally, from a capital standpoint, despite all the capital in this community, there was no pooled capital in this community dedicated to investing in Marin and Sonoma County. So it was with that landscape that I said, let's go build an organization to go fix that. Because if you were a local entrepreneur and you wanted to go build that next great North Bay company, there was no organization to turn to across the public, private, or nonprofit sector, making it their business to help you succeed. So we did that, and fast forward 4 years later, with the help of literally dozens of people who've gone out of their way to help, just because that's who they are, with tireless efforts, not just by myself, but by Elizabeth, by our advisory team, we now have what's called the North Bay Founder Network. There's over 177 founder CEOs of young startup companies in this community that are part of that network, and that's who we are here to help support. From a mentorship standpoint, we launched the Executive Network. We just launched our second cohort, 26 local C-level execs, former CEOs, former founders, former investors who are saying, I want to lean in and mentor. And these are all volunteers. And 22 of those 26 just hosted the Lunch and Learn discussions that you all went to. From a convening standpoint, you're seeing the mecca of our events. And from a capital standpoint, we went out and raised the first ever regional venture capital fund in the history of Marin and Sonoma County. MSIV Fund 1, a $6.6 million investment vehicle. And I'm the first person ever that has a pot of money and a fiduciary obligation to deploy that money into Marin and Sonoma County startup companies. And we're just getting started.
So I lost. Yeah. So I lost track halfway through how many times you said community. And I think you mentioned the fund one time at the end, and I think that is the big differentiator here. And if you think about 2020, there was no community, and now you have built this community, so congratulations. So there is a perception, it's been talked about all day, that the North Bay is not a good place to build a startup company when compared to Silicon Valley. Is that fact or myth?
That is a softball. No, I mean, it is a myth, and that is kind of what we're seeing here today. And what's amazing is that just look at the breadth of startups that we've heard from today, right? Look at the different industries they're in. Look at the geographic diversity of those founders within the North Bay. Look at the sectors they're in, some bootstrap businesses, some venture-backed businesses. There is this giant eclectic group of founders building here. And that's because of what I think Jordan touched on this morning, that this is an incredible place to live. And the reason why we have all these different industries here is because it's not that folks kind of move to Sonoma County, Marin County, because this is the perfect place to build an XYZ business, unless you're maybe in the wine industry, let's say. They move here because they want to live here. And because of that, we attract some of the brightest people from around the world. I mean, again, look at the number of folks that aren't originally from the North Bay who are in this community and have spoken today. So we attract all this talent, and they bring with them 15, 20, 25 years of experience. And they're like, I'm going to go build something, right? So we have all these different industries up here. It's absolutely incredible. And what the metrics indicate, you asked if it's fact or myth, right? It's a myth. Like, I went back, before I launched MSIV, I had to believe my own, BS, part of my French. And I went back and said, how much startup activity has there actually been here? So, and I shared some of these stats at our first North Bay Next event, but I'll share them again. We went back and looked last decade and pretended that Marin and Sonoma County was the 51st U.S. state. And we said, how would this hypothetical 51st U.S. state compare to the other 50 states in terms of its startup footprint, in terms of how many quality startups were formed here. And what I found blew me away. Last decade, Marin and Sonoma would have been home to more quality startups on an absolute basis than half of all US states. Think about that, the 25th ranking state in the country. And on a per capita basis, this would have been the third ranking state in the country behind only California as a whole and the state of Massachusetts. So compared to Silicon Valley, there's not a lot happening here. Compared to any other region around the country, they would cut off their left arm to trade, right, their startup footprint for our startup footprint, except us as a community don't even know about this. We're not even talking about this. So much of this is conventional wisdom, fact, myth, awareness. And what has happened here is that we're starting, first it was a soft whisper, and then we started talking a little louder, and now we're trying to yell from the hilltops. The North Bay is a great place to build your startup company. Come do it here. You're not going to do it in a vacuum. You're going to do it with hundreds of people in this room that actually care and want to be a part of that. And that's what makes this community so special.
Yeah, I think that reflecting back on the stories, it was really all for the same reason. Move to this beautiful place, raise a family. There was nothing strategic about it. And you throw some strategy into a beautiful place, the potential is huge. So what surprised you the most building MSIV?
I would just say how much is actually happening here, right? I mean, I bet my entire career that there was going to be a lot happening here, and I was absolutely wrong, but wrong in a good way, meaning every week I'll meet a new startup company and they're building locally. And you would think, oh, you're meeting a new company. They must have been formed 6 months ago. I mean, I've been doing this full time for 4 years. I will meet a company that's been building here full time for 4 years. And it's taken 4 or 5 years, right, for us to be connected. And that's despite the North Bay really being a collection of small towns. I mean, everyone is 1 degree away from the other. So there is so much happening up here. It's not even funny. And I think the pandemic has given us a once in a generation opportunity as a community to say we want to invest in this local startup community because for 2 big reasons. One, look at all the talent that's moved into this community over the course of the last 4 years. But second, we're no longer competing with San Francisco or Oakland for folks to put their startup company. We're competing with kind of building nowhere or building remotely. And I think that's a contest we can win much better than we could have won necessarily competing with San Francisco.
So this next question is very interesting for me because I have my own perspective and I'll give it in a second. So, and I've listened to you and your perspective multiple times over the past couple of weeks. What do you see the future of the work office space? What makes a company of North Bay company in the 2020 decade? And so before you go, I want to kind of give my quick story. So Redwood Credit Union is growing like crazy. April of 2020, we were supposed to break ground on our second 125,000 square foot back office facility over by the Napa Airport. Everybody goes home, and nobody's coming back to the office ever again. We're going to build a $75 million building over by Napa Airport. So I remember it was 6 sleepless nights sitting there thinking through this, and I decided that people are going to come back to the office. It's going to take a while. And as a community organization focused in on this community, we're not going to let our staff move all over the country. We're paying our salaries, and we're going to continue to help build the North Bay. So we broke ground, built this building, and I'm thankful that we did, and people are coming back to the office. The difference is we have a hybrid environment. It's completely different than it was in the past. But you have some, we're a large company. You have some very unique perspective on all of this.
I think that's right. And I think if you care about our community thriving, if we care about our downtowns thriving, then a future where there's no office workers in our downtowns is not a good future for this community. So I understand why remote work is good for employees. I'm not convinced that it's the best thing in the world for employers, and I'm certainly not convinced that it's a desirable outcome for communities who care about having, vibrant places. So my thesis on this, and I think a lot of this has played out in my conversations with local entrepreneurs and with the growth of this community movement, is I think the 90-minute commute's going away. So if you're living in Petaluma, I just think it's going to be very hard to convince someone to drive down to, South San Francisco every day for work when there might be opportunities that person can do from Petaluma, without having to do that, can do it remotely. But if you talk to that person in Petaluma and you could give them the same job, right? But job A, so like same pay, same job prospects, but job A is working for a global company from home in Petaluma, based nowhere. And job B is, from a Petaluma-based company that's 10 minutes from their house with people they like. My bet is that we are social animals and that 99% of people would choose option B, right? Because it's not the office specifically that we hate. I think it's not, this idea that, you're giving up flexibility. You can still have flexible work arrangements even with you coming in. So that is kind of the future at MSIV that we're advocating for, that the future of work is going to be hyperlocal. And it might mean that the next great North Bay company looks different. So, the next San Rafael-based company that scales to 500 employees, I don't think is going to have 500 employees in San Rafael. I think what's going to make that company the next great North Bay company is when they're 500 employees, that they have 50 people in downtown San Rafael. That's their headquarters, that's their core, coupled with maybe remote individuals, coupled with other offices. And that is the future that we are grabbing very aggressively with MSIV and kind of pitching that future to local founders. And we're not saying, like, we have portfolio companies, we have community companies, and it almost seems sometimes they're like embarrassed to tell us that they hired another employee that's not here in the North Bay. And we're like, look, if that's the best thing for your business, right, that's fine. We embrace that. But we also want to find a future where folks can hire people locally, and that's the future we need. So if I can encapsulate what MSIV's vision is for this community, I mean, it's actually quite simple. I want to see a future where, we have 10 high-growth startup companies in downtown Santa Rosa, a future where we have 10 high-growth startup companies in downtown San Rafael, and see what that's doing for local economic development, for local vibrancy, for boutiques in those downtowns that are struggling, right? It's not the 67-year-old on a fixed income living 3 blocks off downtown San Rafael that's going to go shopping at some overpriced boutique downtown, right? It's going to be, a 31-year-old with disposable income that just went to work and is going to go frequent those establishments. So startups play an outsized role in that, and that is why we are yelling as loud as we can that as a community we need to come in and embrace this movement and help build the future.
Yeah, I agree about the people are social animals. So COVID and working from home was not good for people, for our employees. There's some mental wellness issues that came along with that. There's not that many Netflix shows out there anyways to keep people busy. So we do have a hybrid environment where it's a minimum of 2 days a week, and we give them the flexibility to be in all 5. They want the flexibility, but more and more they're choosing to come in the office more and more just because they realize that how much they miss that. So what do you say to people that are comfortable with the idea North Bay economy should be totally reliant on wine, tourism, and agribusiness?
I think
Keep it clean.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think where people misinterpret what we're talking about is they'll say we're trying to drastically change, right, the local economy. And yes, that is true, but it's a yes and, right? So this is about diversification. And when you have, let's look at the last 7 years here in the North Bay, right? We had multiple devastating fires. We had a mega drought that is now thankfully finally over, but who knows when it's going to come back and rear its head. And you had a global pandemic. And when you look at an economy entirely reliant on wine, tourism, and agribusiness, and you put those 3 challenges in front of them, we need to be making investments in diversified sectors. We need to be diversifying our local economy. And that is what we're talking very loudly about here. We want the existing industries to thrive, but we want to augment that with, the startup companies from the various different sectors that we heard from today. And I think it's super critical to our future. It's super critical to this community getting younger. Marin County and Sonoma County are 2 of the oldest counties in the state of California. And a big piece of making this an attractive place for young people to live and come is to having the types of jobs in this community, that the next generation, increasingly wants more of. And who is talking about that? Who is taking it as their responsibility to help create those jobs? And I would say, as a collective social impact sector, as a collective movement here, as a collective startup movement, I think we are quite candidly moving that conversation forward more quickly than anyone else in the community. And we want everyone else to now catch up with us and to help us do that, because we can't do it by ourselves.
Yeah, you reminded me of a story. You just spoke to one of my groups a couple of weeks ago about the fund and looking from our foundation to possibly do something. And our investment guy, who, when you look at investment wise, he's pretty fickle about investments, and he's part of this group. And so Zach got off. I said, I want you guys to get together, go brainstorm, come up with an idea. And he raises his hand, says, he goes, you want my opinion? I'm like, no, because I wanted them to go as a group, and I didn't want him to really throw his idea out there. So I finished what I was saying, but my personality couldn't help it. I was like, all right, I got to know what what your opinion is. I can't get off the phone without it. He goes, I love the idea, and everybody was like, what? The fund. He goes, I think it has a lot of upside. There's certainly risk in the fund, but we give away money all the time, and we never see any return to the community. It's the right thing for the community. But he goes, my kids are in high school, and he goes, they're very unlikely right now to be able to come back because of jobs, and my wife is really going to be pissed off if they don't come back. So I think this is a really good idea. So we have him now. So your fund has about 10 investments in local startup companies since launching in 2021. What do you look at when you're considering an investment?
Yeah, so it's been a crazy week. We completed our 9th investment on Monday and our 10th investment yesterday, and we hadn't done a deal since early November. So this has been quite the week for us. So we've now backed 10 local startup companies, and I think the biggest thing is we're looking for entrepreneurs that are looking to build what we would call category defining enterprises, right? Companies that, if they're successful, can really come to redefine a category. And we heard from Jason from Fireside earlier. I mean, building a piece of software that every fire agency in this country should be running their business on. We both know Union Credit out of Santa Rosa is building a one-click lending marketplace for credit unions, but ultimately wants to change the way consumer loans are written in this country. So big visions ultimately go to these companies being venture scale, and there are some weaknesses in having to deploy out of a venture fund, and one is that the venture math is entirely unforgiving. And the reality is that I think there are a ton of incredible companies out there that are absolutely worthy of investment and that are absolutely going to be successful, but the vast majority of companies just won't reach venture scale, and that doesn't make them good or bad. It just means a venture fund is not the right fit for them from an investment standpoint. So the three things that we kind of look at fall into what I would say is team, market, and traction. From a team standpoint, I mean, we want to back founders that are gritty, that will never give up, that are going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they're successful, and they'll figure out a way to go do it. From a market standpoint, going back to these needing to be in large enough industries, going after large enough opportunities for us to back. And then from a traction standpoint, I think the best way to know if an entrepreneur is going to be successful with someone you're just meeting is looking at what's happened in the past and the longer track record and conversation you've been having for them of 3 months ago they said they were going to do this, and then 3 months later you talk again and then that exact thing happened. I think that's really important in terms of trust building and being able to believe that. So we're ultimately looking for folks that we believe could build that next great North Bay company, and that's who we're backing. But what I think makes MSIV unique as a fund is that we'll meet with 30 companies and we'll say no to 29 of them, and that doesn't that math is typical for venture funds. I think what's different is that for the 29 we're saying no to, we still want them to be a part of this community. I think it's a testament to the folks in this room that there's a lot of folks that we haven't invested in that are here today because they're just as excited about partnering with us on community than they are in investment, and that just shows how genuine they are about the community piece of this, and it makes me feel good.
So I think at the end of the day, you invest in people. And you talked about the founders not giving up. I've thought about this a lot. How do you tell whether somebody is going to give up or not?
That's a hard one. I mean, ultimately, you have an opinion, and is that opinion, formed in? Is that a well-reasoned opinion or is it a biased opinion? I mean, that's what I'm certainly checking myself on every single day. The best I've figured out, especially given that we're running a hyperlocal fund, is every entrepreneur we're talking to, we can talk to others in the community who've known them for a heck of a lot longer than we have, right? So if I've only known that founder for 2 months, I want to talk to someone that's known them for 20 years, right? Or who did work with them at their last company. And we spend a lot of time on the human piece for sure.
So you can't count today because today doesn't count. What gets you excited and motivated to come to work every day?
I think it's building the future. I mean, today's theme is build it here, right? And at MSIV, we are trying to build the future for this community. And my kind of ask of everyone in this room is like just to kind of be a part of building that future. The beauty of this community. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, as my wife reminds me all the time. Yeah, you can maybe hear the accent a little bit, but I've only been in the North Bay for 8 years, right? And the very fact that I'm able to sit up here on this stage, sitting with you, right, has been a leader of this community for 20 plus years, but you're not from here either, right? So it is a testament to how open a community this is and how welcoming it is, and that there is the ability for anyone in this community who decides they want to lead and be a leader here to go do that. So I would just say whatever you're excited about, help build the future, because this community needs more builders, and that's how we're going to make this a better place for us and for our kids.
So we're out of time. We were going to talk a little bit about economic development in the North Bay over the past 30 years, and that could have been an hour-long conversation just between the two of us. And I have a lot of thoughts on what's gone well and what could go better or what could have gone better. But I do believe heavily that this today and the past 4 years is this historic moment where people are going to look back 10 years from now and talk about this company called MSIV and this guy named Zach that focused on this, not just jobs, but startup businesses, and really created this community. And you use community in lots of different ways. And I really think that this is going to be a game changer for the North Bay. So on behalf of us, thank you for all of you and your team do for our North Bay from MSIV.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for being here. And again, we're really just getting started. So I'm super excited for not just the rest of today, but my running joke is that I'll be here doing this for the next 20 years. So just let me know what you're doing. But I appreciate everyone's time, attention, and passion for building the future. Thank you.